So our last speaker again, of course, is Dr. Carolyn, President of the Australian Network for Plant Conservation. So Carolyn's going to do a conference wrap-up for us, and that'll be it, apart from the field trips. Thanks, Carolyn.
So, all right, just bear with me while I just get technology sorted here. I have a confession to make, Joe. I nicked one of the hard copy programs at the very beginning of the conference to get me through. I know David Coates was very envious. Okay, so how I'd like to do this is just have some closing comments, some thoughts, some ways forward that have occurred to me, and then open it up to everyone to have some comments as well about some ways forward, things we might look to achieve in the future. And then I want to go to our very important part of the thank yous for this fabulous conference. Okay, so as you know, from little things, big things grow. That's been our theme. Well, how about from awesome people, bigger things can grow? Marlene reminded us of the value of reaching back in time for inspiration, to check in on the utility of our research, and that came with a reminder of our current crisis and another reminder for us to advance our conservation efforts pronto. We not only need to forge new ground, but we also need to stand on the shoulder of giants, a theme Lucy mentioned as well. And Steve, your forecast or wish that we need to incorporate chromosomal variants in our studies, that could really bring cytology forward as an assessment tool for conservation as well. And our talk should leave you in no doubt of the work ahead of us, brought to you by adverse climate change. What a reminder of the crisis that we have before us with Darren's graphic images of the gashes that have scoured our wet tropics. I might have a daisy for you to handle those gashes. Yet from that set of studies, we also see hope of what teams can achieve and from Maurizio, reassurance that our projects can get off on the right foot with the development of genetic tools to not only help us solve conservation questions, but also to allow us to use the dwindling cash resources more efficiently and more effectively for the conservation of species. Squeeze every dollar, as Jessica reminded us. The older one gets, the more opportunities one gets to understand the Australian flora, and also the greater opportunity we will have to use case study approaches in our role as teachers, communicators, leaders of restoration teams, community groups, and for our peers. And we have the ability to use published studies and publicly available databases such as Austrates, and each and every one of us also relies on data sets and information not yet published. Put your hands up if you're sitting on those gold mines. Down here, down up, down there, I know. But I feel as time goes by, we're missing the important gems, the factoids that lay buried in the unpublished underworld of data sets and even imagery. And even it's buried in published papers. I used to think that as researchers we were trained to delve deeply into the published literature and PhD theses. Most of these are online now. Look at the fabulous utility that Jennifer found when she recovered that thesis from 1988 for her contemporary studies. It's certainly got a lot easier since the mid-1990s to find stuff. Online journals are the norm. Google Scholar has long overtaken the hard copy cab abstracts one would use in the library to chase down new and emerging work, albeit with a time delay. And hands up if you remember going to the library to do that, to go through biological abstracts. Come on, I'm looking at you two. Yeah. Yeah. But now I hear over and over that our training scientists are marked down in their undergraduate years for citing papers that are more than 5 years old. Now this comes directly from an ecology group of students studying at a group of 8 university in Victoria, in Melbourne, up Swanston Street. Okay. So channeling the excellent talks by Carol, Paul and Oliver, different approaches they use, but for me there was a message of importance in there. Plants teach us to be grounded, and the value of grassroots enterprises that promote the telling of information is so important. And from this has precipitated an idea for me that the ANPC needs a threatened species portal, a platform linked or even integrated with others, such as the exciting work that Jane unfolded for Queensland, or iNaturalist, as detailed by Michael, a place where conservation assessments can be lodged, a place for fire traits, Tony, could be suddenly incorporated, and a place where we can consolidate the citation of published works against the species, but perhaps more importantly, where punters like yourselves can upload field data, observation, or even links to where such info can be found. So I want us to do much more than link to our published works. I'd like us to donate our data sets, our factoids, and let us link our endeavours for a true collaboration with First Nations people, as their knowledge will help with contacts and conservation. And one study really comes to mind for me. You don't get the gem of the factoid in the abstract of the paper, so you can't really just skim the abstract. But the paper was by Prakash in 1969, who I had the privilege of working with in the 1990s. And his paper was called A Contribution to the Life History of Angophora floribunda. It was in the Australian Journal of Botany in 1969 in issue 17. Now, Angophora has a naturally low production of ripe ovules. I think it was something like only 1 in 20 could be fertilised, explaining to me, many decades later, why it was a bit of a challenge to get viable seed from them for restoration efforts, much more so than other allied eucalypts. Now, without Prakash's information, more likely I would have banged the drum of pollinator limitation and spent all sorts of time and energy trying, and no doubt falling out of trees, to work out the fecundity issues. This study, neatly logged into the portal under Angophora floribunda, will simply save us time for those sorts of questions. Make a start by submitting an article to our APC journal. Large or small, submit your case studies. I don't know the how, but I'm sure we can solve that issue as a collective of how to do this thing. During my work with the United Nations in 2000 under the FAO program of pollinator conservation, I came across this idea. It was proposed by a gentleman working with the FAO at that time. But for those of us in the room, it was an audience not unlike this, it was a classic example of great idea, you go for it, when what was needed was a grassroots uptake of that concept. One person can't build it, a network is needed to do that. And I think it could be the Australian Network for Plant Conservation that takes up this gauntlet. We would need funding for ongoing database truthing, management and dissemination, but an information officer that creates links with local or regional nodes could do that. And I suggest, let's be bold and do this for all of the Australian flora. We know many of them are going to be threatened in due course anyway, from adverse fire regimes. And thanks, Tony, for that reminder of what's probably coming down the track soon for us in that department. So not only changing climates, but we've still got land use intensification, even with the legislative tools at hand as outlined so eloquently by Gabrielle. But the ANP Society is one that gets things done. Let's look into this portal idea. I say let's include it in our strategic planning event, which we are hoping to get underway in February next year. And remember the words of Hugh, philanthropy, autonomy and grassroots, but don't forget the words from Adrian, the information that you hold. And that's what I think has, for me, come from this conference this few days, is that we've got a lot more work to do to consolidate information so that we can very efficiently get on with conservation of our fantastic biodiversity. So I would just like to open it up and see what other... I know Lucy has some ideas, but to get some ideas of how you'd like to go forward in terms of what we do in the short term, what we might have ready for doing in a conference down the track, and And any other ideas? Is that Hugh? So just the lights are, yep.
Just two quick, I suppose, opportunities or suggestions. Firstly, the world's biggest conservation science conference will be in Brisbane next year. Who knew that? That's not good, is it? June 15th to 19th, ICCB, the International Congress on Conservation Biology. It happens every 2 years. It gets to Australia every 12 years. And it's in Brisbane, somewhere over the east. So this is the big opportunity for ANPC to have a presence and for plant conservation to have a presence on the world stage. There'll be 2,000 people there, 1,000 probably from the region and 1,000 from the rest of the world. So I'd encourage you to attend. And I'm going to segue that into saying that is a great time to, as Jana pointed out, put out some statements about what you think are the most pressing issues on plant conservation, because the media will be humming around that conference at a national and global scale. So always piggyback on an event, and that's critical. And to that end, of all the things that you want to actually say, the Biodiversity Council has gone from an organisation that didn't exist a year and a half ago to having, I think it's 25% national recognition amongst every Australian that we exist. 25% of Australians know the Biodiversity Council exists. So our job is to elevate your science to inform policy. That's what we do all the time. So I know that you will never employ a full-time lobbyist. Well, not in the next 10 years, ANPC. But if you want to get out an impactful story that transitions myrtle rust policy and saves those 26 rainforest mutaceae, you know where to come. Jana and me. I sort of know what a plant is. They're greenish, chlorophyll, something like that. Bottom line is, and we can say things that you can't say because we have no government funding, right? Entirely philanthropy based. So that's why we exist, to be lobbyists and get the transformations you need. So I open that as an opportunity as the co-chief counsellor of the organisation, without asking the board, that, you know, if you want to get stuff done once or twice a year on a big conservation issue around plant conservation, then work with Jana and I. Just need the basic science. You've got all that covered, and then we can get it through to the policy makers at the state and federal level. And as I say, ICCB is a good opportunity to test that out.
Good, thank you.
That's it.
Thank you.
So it's an offer, two offers,
And
both free.
To that, I would add professional lobbying for funding too. There are people that do that, not only lobbyists for politicians, but people who will work out how to get you the funds into your society. And I think that's something that we can also have a look at, because we need to build capacity in order to do some of these grand plans. So I open it up to others to put forward some things. Bob, thank you.
Yeah, just following on from that, conferences like the ICCB are a huge opportunity for ANPC both to gather information and to promulgate information. But good as this conference has been, I don't want anybody going home thinking that we're flush. We've got some project funding. We've got very little in the way of systemic ongoing infrastructural funding. If you've enjoyed this conference, one of the things you can do best to support ANPC is get your home organisation to to affiliate as an organisational member if they're not already, or to get other organisations that you have some influence in to look at doing the same. That will increase our capability to get to things like the ICCB or the biosecurity conference that they hold up on the Gold Coast every year at some outrageous registration cost, things of that sort, which we simply can't do at the moment. So please do help us to build the network, both through individual membership, yours and others, and through organisational memberships.
Well said. Did you want to say anything, Lucy, about some of the ideas you've been putting together? It's a microphone just behind you.
You'll have to cut me off, otherwise I'll just keep going and going. I think I really liked Jana's point about things that are kind of, maybe published 2 or 3 years ago that are actually still relevant, like ANPC sitting on this gold mine of information with all the guidelines that have been published, and the network of people that, could be reached out to at the drop of a hat. So, yeah, I mean, we could just continue to to keep communicating some of that great work that's in those guidelines already. I think I've been talking to a few people about deep dives into some of the chapters. So whether there's the genetics chapter or the record keeping chapters, things like that. If maybe they could actually be guidelines in themselves. So if anybody's got any, if they didn't like what I did and want to do it better, then go for it. So I think having some deep dives, and I really like the idea of a portal or a database or like a Wikipedia. I thought iNaturalist is amazing, and I've been talking to a few people about how it's great that you can have experts validate things, because I think we've been talking about propagation guidelines. I think after we did the Flora Bank guidelines, people really want to know how to grow their own species, and we didn't have capacity to list, the thousands of species in the whole of Australia. But, propagation guidelines where home gardeners could put up, this is how I grow X, Y, Z, and this is what I use for my cuttings, or this is the temperature I use, or whatever. But then you could validate it, right? You could get other people to say, actually, that's really good. And if you've got a scientific publication, you could reference it. So some sort of web portal or database or Wikipedia for propagation tips or for translocation tips, or something that's, I guess, able to be updated. That's kind of a little bit of a seed of idea as well.
Good. Okay. Okay, right at the back. Sorry, Joe. Is it Yana? I'm sorry, my long distance is not fabulous at the minute.
Hello. Lucy's idea is great. And if you're not already doing it, you should absolutely be the font of knowledge and expertise and evidence base for all of the community gardening groups and bush care groups and all these community groups around the country, feeding out digestible little chunks of the best science. So all those groups feel like they're being informed by the best science, and you're the group they trust for that. And just imagine how that would end up building your base. That was not what I wanted to say, but when Lucy started talking, I thought that's the idea I had, and it was great. What I wanted to say, even prior to that, was I went to the Nature Positive Summit last week, and it must have cost, 50 times more than this. And this is better. I think the quality of the talks was better. It was more interesting. This was really good. I think I got a lot out of coming to this conference and from the talks, and so thanks to everyone who has spoken and contributed to the sessions, because I found it really great.
Okay, so I know we've got to probably hit the road, some of us. I think we might just sort of move on to the next bit, pick up some of these things in strategic planning days, which is being scheduled for February as well.
Can I just answer the question on plant propagation day?
Yep.
So it's Eddie Wayon from the Australian Native Plant Society Australia. The Australian Native Plant Society Australia was formed to get data on propagation of native plants, and they've been doing that for 80 years. They used to be called the Society for Growing Australian Plants. And they have about 26 study groups on the species and genera around Australia. Now, I'm probably the only ANPSA member here. There was another one here earlier from Native Plants Queensland. And I will elect to inform ANPSA, but I'm also informing ANPC that there is this database that's on their website. There are study groups that anyone can join. There are newsletters that got data on propagation techniques, heating, seed preparation. There is heaps of data around.
I think the risk is that we are overloaded with information, and if we can go in and pick up information on a specific species easily, that'll be something that we can draw
Well, what I'm
on.
saying is there are these study groups that got data.
Yeah, on propagation, but there's a lot of ecological and conservation matters, plant breeding in an ecological sense, which is not being picked up. And I think we don't want to spend our dollars reinventing the wheel. Maybe it'd be better to compare data sets from a time past with now, but some of the fundamental stuff's been done. We need to take that and harness it and move on with some other questions. And propagation is great, it's there. But when we're talking about the population ecology of X, Y, Z threatened species, there will be data sets out there in student portals of student theses, student products. And I'm looking at John Hunter here because he and I have both supervised a lot of students who just do small projects for maybe 6 months on, 12 months on, that are fantastic collections of information for that time period, but they don't get out. And that's the sort of stuff I want to harness and get into a system where people all over Australia can see that. So I'd like to get on to the thank yous, to the good part of the day. And while I'm getting organised here, could I ask Tony and Dave to come up to help me with a few things? Tony, past president, Dave was acting president there as well, and we've got some lovely thank yous to do, and I'd like you guys to be part of that. So I'd like to thank all our chairs and speakers and poster presenters and workshop teams. A very, very big thank you. I'd like to do a big shout out to those people for which this was their first time that they've ever given a poster or a presentation. Good on you. I hope you enjoyed this forum as your maiden step into science, and I hope to see you again. To all our delegates, many have travelled from the west and from the top of the country and everywhere in between. Thank you very much for making the trek. And our First Nation speakers who graciously shared their knowledge with great aplomb and humour. Just a huge call out there. And taken as a whole, but all of your individual efforts too are what makes ANPC so unique and an effective college of experts. Now, on behalf of the ANPC, I'd like to thank our conference partners who have helped make this event possible, in particular the Queensland Government and Australian National Botanic Gardens as gold sponsors. Also Southern Queensland Landscapes, Biodiversity Council, the Stanthorpe Rare Wildlife Consortium. We've seen a lot from them here this few days. The Bunya People Aboriginal Corporation as well, Alcoa, University of Queensland, Toowoomba Regional Council, Australian Flora Foundation, Bunya People Aboriginal Corporation, Botanic Gardens of Sydney, Cambrium Country Cottages and Native Plants of Queensland, CSIRO Publishing. So a huge thanks to all of these wonderful societies that have supported us. Our local team, our University of Southern Queensland volunteers, Paul, Bernadette, Larissa and Caroline. I hope you're all here still. Huge thank you to you as well. And then, these conferences sort of don't magically happen. We've had a bevy of team in the background working away at things. And before I get on to thanking them, I'd just like to put in a plug to say that our next conference is looking like it's 2026 in North Queensland. We'll have more information from Darren about that in due course, but thank you. And perhaps a poll on what will meet our needs for that time, whether we have an open forum plus some workshops and so forth. We'll get onto that down the track, but we're in the early discussions and we thank Darren for looking into that for us. Okay, so I'd like to thank the efforts of the following conference organising committee members who are here today. And I need you gentlemen to rifle through these with their appropriate name for the appropriate person. So Bob Magnuson, thank you very much. Please come up. Paul Donatou. Richie Southerton, our paparazzi. Jen Silcock. Kate Reardon-Smith. There's Kate. Yes, thank you. Jane Thorpe. And where's that Joe? Get here. Joe Lynch. Up you come. Joe, we couldn't have, of course, got this all happening without your help. Your dignified, quiet, calm manner behind the scenes, dealing with all the issues as they came forward. You sorted them out with great ease and care and kindness for us all. I particularly would like to thank you for chaperoning me through this process and looking after me with all the things I had to do. And I hope you get a great rest after this. I know Jo's been putting in days and days and days of work. She's our part-time business manager, but that's not been the case of recent time. You've been full-time, and I very much hope you have a wonderful break.
Yes, I'm going to hide in a cave somewhere.
Okay. So thank you all for a great conference. Farewell, safe travels, enjoy the field trips if you're going to do those, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.
Can I just do one more thank you? And just one more quick thank you to Jeff down here, who supplied all the plants for us this week. He went and picked them up, took them home, watered them, and then brought them in, and now he has to take them home again. So thank you, Jeff.